The only leg was subscribed for 3 months, saying, I was talking to my dad last night and told him I've been watching TYT regularly with John Iadarola, and he said, oh, I see his shows too. He's really hot. My dad is gay. I was surprised, and I was like, awesome. I think he's hot too. Good for you, John. Hey, I'm just glad I can bring families together. Thank you. So many times I say things just because I know Brett will hate it.
At least you didn't say help families come together.
God. We're never going to be professional again. I'm going to throw out my ties. I still have ties. Who am I kidding?
You're watching The Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today, as always on Wednesdays, is John Iadarola, host of The Damage Report, and a good friend and colleague of mine. Hi, John.
Hello, friend and colleague. I'm glad to be here with you in both capacities.
Yes, yes. John is a great person. He is the head of the Dragon Squad, also known as Dragon Daddy. Watch The Damage Report. That's where you'll kind of get what that's all about.
Maybe.
But we have quite a show for you today. We're going to talk about how Senate Democrats are reacting or responding to the fact that they have failed so far to take control of the Senate. There are some similar themes to what we heard from House Democrats in that fiery call that Abigail Spanberger was involved in. But I'll give you the details on that later. And then later in the show, in the post game, which will be open to the public today, we're going to talk a little bit about leftists and why they hate Thanksgiving, according to Charlie Kirk. But before we get to all of that fun stuff,
stuffing.
Just a few announcements for you all. Your online activity needs to be protected, and the best way to do that is through a VPN. Luckily, you can get a good discount on Pure VPN by going to tyt.com/pure. It is the internet security you need, and you get a 7-day trial for only 99 cents. Plus 62% off a yearly plan. Again, just go to tyt.com/pure. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge fan of trees. And every time you go shopping and use a card, you can actually plant trees simultaneously. Learn more about that by going to tyt.com/trees. And finally, Shop TYT. I don't even know who's authorizing them to do this because this is insane. They're doing 10 days of Black Friday. Day one, let me give you the deets. Day one, take 15% off everything using code FLASHKICKOFF at shoptyt.com. Everything, including that shirt that you're wearing. Look at that fancy shirt, cognitively there.
I know, this is a funny one. I know it's easy to forget the crazy things we memorialized in shirts, but you're not gonna wanna forget this one.
I love it, I love it.
It's good for anybody, whether you're a person, a woman, man, maybe a camera or TV.
And look, members get a special discount. So if you're a member, go to tyt.com/notice, tyt.com/notice, and you can get 20% off everything. So,
what?
Damn, pays to be a member.
The manager is out of the building and they've gone insane.
They've gone, you're killing me, Larry. Okay. All right, well, let's get to the news. We have a good mix of dunking on both Democrats and Republicans, and they certainly deserve it. Let's begin with Democrats, though. So, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had a lengthy phone conversation over the weekend with Senate Democrats who were concerned about the fact that the Democrats failed to take control of the Senate following the 2020 election. And there were similar themes to what we heard about regarding the House Democrats and the call that they had with Nancy Pelosi. But luckily in this case, there were some progressives who spoke up and defended progressive policy proposals. So let's start off with what we know so far. One Democratic senator who spoke to the Hill on condition of anonymity said this: "We shouldn't have lost this election. You can explain it away, but the reality is Republicans have been beating the hell out of government since the Reagan years and saying Democrats are the defenders of bad government, and that's what the American people believe. We can't get an invitation to the dance unless we overcome that, and the way we overcome that is having some things that are wins." So there isn't a lot of specific language there, which is frustrating to say the least, but I mean, I guess anyone can interpret that in any way they would like, but my interpretation is, hey, Republicans seem to have a message that's working, whereas Democrats don't seem to have a message that resonates with people. And maybe we need to focus on some wins, meaning maybe we need to focus on policies that positively impact people's lives economically. And so let me give you more. There were, of course, some centrists who whined about the socialism word, even though, with the exception of Bernie Sanders referring to himself as a democratic socialist, there weren't really senators running on insanely left-wing socialist policies. So here's what we found out. The two most common knocks on our candidates were socialism and defund the police. So again, John, same thing we heard from House Democrats who were complaining about their congressional losses. And so before I give you more details, jump in for a second. Do you think we're being too tough on them?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly because they are anonymous. And as you said, at least that first quote, there's not a lot of specifics to go by there. I guess it's sort of like a Rorschach test. I instantly assume, you know what, probably not a progressive because the odds that they are is like what, 2 or 3 in 50 or 48. So I would assume that it's sort of, it's like saying we need to do something, we need to have a win, but it's coming from what I believe to be an unacknowledged position of incredible weakness. That, as you said, they have a message. You described it as a message that wins. I might describe it as a message that they don't even try to counter. If the argument has been for decades that Democrats are the defenders of bad government and that people get angry because the government doesn't seem to do much, use that in an election year where the economy is destroyed and people are dying by the thousands from a pandemic that the government is not using. The Republicans don't get to say that the Democrats are the party of bad government when they occupy every seat of power and do nothing as people lose their jobs and die. Maybe do a little bit of jujitsu there and flip it around on them. And then on those wins, maybe actually deliver something that does fix people's problems. And I don't know that that's going to happen. Even in the things that seem like a slam dunk. Chuck Schumer saying Biden should cancel $50,000 of student loan debt. Doesn't take legislation, we can do it almost instantly. And Joe Biden has indicated in the past he's interested in doing that. Now, with every day that we get closer to inauguration, there's more stipulations and limitations and means testings and all of that.
Yes.
You know what that seems like? That seems like best case scenario, something the Republicans are going to use to attack it, and it's going to help less people. Maybe help more people for once, because even though the Republicans have been running on that message, the Dems still win almost every election. They still win the popular vote. Use that for something, actually earn that support that people are giving you, but they don't want to. And the people who are giving them advice on how to do that, those are the ones that they then turn and attack.
You know, and there is a very noticeable difference between how Republican lawmakers treat their constituents or respond and react to their constituents versus how Democratic lawmakers do. Democratic lawmakers seem irritated by their constituents. They don't necessarily listen to them. They seem to fail to understand the economic frustrations that many Americans are facing right now. They seem to completely neglect the economic component of this discussion, which I don't understand. At the same time, you look at Republicans and Donald Trump, for better or worse, right? They care so deeply about playing into their base. I mean, to the point where they feed into some pretty toxic and dangerous behavior in this country, particularly Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, remember, wanted to invade Iran approximately 58 times during his first term. And one of the reasons why he hasn't, despite the fact that he, is this impulsive lunatic, is because he knows that his base doesn't have an appetite for war. So I'm giving you that example to kind of juxtapose what we see from Democrats versus Republicans. Democrats need to make the case that they're better for their constituents, that they would have better policy proposals, but they also need to stop slapping their supporters around, as we see over and over again. But anyway, luckily there were some progressives who spoke up during this meeting. Progressives argued that Republicans have moved further and further to the right and that Democrats have followed them in the rightward drift of American political debate, that we're so disconnected from working Americans, said one Democratic senator. So we don't know exactly who said that, but luckily there were some voices of reason in that conversation. And so AOC put out a little bit of a cryptic tweet today, kind of poking fun at some of the rhetoric that we've been hearing, both among House Democrats and Senate Democrats. She said this: if you say socialism 3 times in a mirror, a corporate lobbyist-backed candidate grows their wings.
Yeah, the metaphors are a bit mixed there, but that happens to me too. It's funny, and yeah, it's this mythic quality that we give to that word, that even if you take for granted that it works, that it matters that they call you a socialist, this is not new. They've always done it. They will always do it. You could run Chuck Grassley as the Democratic nominee. They'd call him the socialist Chuck Grassley. You can rest assured of that.
They're calling Joe Biden a socialist.
Yeah.
They're calling Joe Biden a socialist. The guy who was up on that debate stage talking about how much he loves fracking. No, that guy is not a socialist. He's not. I mean, the guy who had his meeting with Wall Street donors to tell them, don't worry, nothing will fundamentally change under my leadership. That guy's a socialist, really? They're gonna call their political opponents socialists no matter what. The question is your leadership, right? The way that you're representing your constituents powerful enough to overcome name calling by Republicans? And clearly it's not. And so if they're worried, they need to reconsider what their priorities have been. And it is hard to reprioritize when maybe your campaign donors don't want you to focus on economic solutions.
Yep.
But I can tell you this, that would definitely fire up voters, and it would lead to quite a bit of support, especially at a time when we still haven't received another economic stimulus package as this pandemic rages on. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Michigan, because we had some bad news yesterday, but luckily that story developed into a little bit of good news. So, Republicans in the Wayne County Board of Canvassers in Michigan blocked the certification of the presidential results. Now, that was the big news yesterday, but luckily that county, which includes Detroit, did vote for Joe Biden, and now it turns out that shortly after blocking the certification, that board later unanimously voted in favor to certify the election results. So the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has more on this. Let's watch.
The Wayne County Board of Canvassers actually reversed their past decision and voted 4-0 to certify the full results, including the city of Detroit, for Wayne County.
Now, why would they do that?
Well, it appears that the truth won in this scenario. Basically, the evidence is clear. There were no irregularities. There was no evidence of widespread fraud. And in fact, there were simply minor clerical errors, as we were discussing, actually less clerical errors than in past election. And that really isn't a valid reason, in my view, and apparently, ultimately, the board to invalidate and silence the voices of voters in the state's largest county. So I think they did the right thing. They performed their duty and they certified the election for the voters in Wayne County.
Now, I do think it's problematic that the two Republicans on that board refused to certify the election results initially. And they did so while repeating some of the lunacy coming from Trump's campaign. And there should be consequences for that, even though they reversed course later. And I do want to tell you why this was such a giant problem. Because remember, Wayne County includes Detroit, which overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, and of course is a predominantly African-American part of Michigan and a part of the county. And so the head of the NAACP in Detroit, Reverend Wendell Anthony, actually called the board out on their initial decision, and I think his words are powerful. So let's take a quick look at what he had to say.
You have extracted a black city out of a county and said the only one that are at fault at an issue is the city of Detroit, where 80% of the people who reside here are African Americans. Shame on you. Shame on you for leading to this level of corruption. You have disavowed your right to even sit in the seat that you occupy. You are a disgrace as relates to the ability to have a free and impartial election in this nation.
So if they had refused to certify the results in Wayne County, that would have impacted the state of Michigan in regard to the presidential election. So President-elect Joe Biden won Michigan by more than 148,000 votes, a victory made possible by a strong showing in Wayne County, where he netted more than 322,000 votes over President Donald Trump. The initial party line deadlock would have put Biden's Michigan victory in jeopardy, but projections indicate Biden will win 306 electoral votes, which means he'd still become the next president, even in the unlikely scenario that he doesn't get Michigan's 16 electoral votes. And so far, it appears that he will get those electoral votes. John.
Yeah, which means that they're willing to do this seemingly unprecedented, impossible thing where they just pick and choose which cities based on racial composition they want to count and which they don't, knowing that even if they do that, they have to also do it in other states. Like it wouldn't be enough there. Trump would still lose, but they're willing to do it. Even though it's a long shot there and it's a long shot in other cases, they're willing to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people on the long shot chance that it works in some other area. And it is amazing that we're seeing this not only in Detroit, but also Atlanta, we're seeing much of the same thing in Georgia, that it's really sort of completing the full Republican approach to democracy going forward. We'd had 2/3 of the strategy up until this election, where before the vote, if you were black, you were gonna find God knows how many obstacles to registration and actually being able to vote and all of that. When you go to vote, you're gonna have to wait in long lines because they've selectively culled polling or ballot places to vote in areas where black voters are more common. And you're likely to get intimidated, and there will be Proud Boys and all of that. Now, even if you go through all the obstacles leading up to election day and you actually go and manage to vote, now they are becoming incredibly comfortable with just selectively trying to weed out your vote afterward. It's like the closing of the circle there. And it would be nice to think that this is just a Trump thing, that Trump's crazy and so he's got Rudy Giuliani going off there and that's why you're seeing this, but is it gonna be? Is Tom Cotton or Tucker Carlson in 4 years? If it's imagine if it was just one state. This isn't enough. Like Detroit flipping wouldn't actually get Trump the presidency, but what if it was? What if in the next election it's just one state? Do you think that they're gonna be shy?
Like Florida.
Yeah, about Florida or God knows where. Maybe it's Arizona next time. Maybe it's Nevada. Maybe Las Vegas. Maybe their votes need to not count next time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that you brought up all the various ways in which the Republican Party, under the leadership of Donald Trump, tried to intimidate voters or spread all sorts of disinformation regarding mail-in ballots. We also had Louis DeJoy, who's still currently the Postmaster General, dismantling the post office's ability to process an influx of mail-in ballots. I mean, to be quite honest with you guys, I did not think that based on all of the actions that were taken by Republicans prior to the election, that it was gonna be a free and fair election. I didn't think that Joe Biden had a chance because of all of these various disadvantages. But he managed to win 306 electoral votes, despite all of those challenges, despite the voter intimidation. And yeah, Republicans just pivoted on to a different talking point and a completely different narrative of how this entire election was rigged. The fact that you have Republican lawmakers right now who behind the scenes acknowledge that Joe Biden is the president-elect, but then publicly enable Donald Trump tells you everything you need to know about Republican lawmakers. They are out for themselves. They only care about their own political futures, their own careers. Doesn't matter if our democracy is completely destroyed in the process of their own self-serving actions. That's our government. And so I think I can understand why so many people are not so trusting toward our government, but we need to change that. We need to elect these types of people out. And the only way to do that, to be quite honest with you, is to actually listen to the American people and what they genuinely want in this country, what they need to live happy, prosperous lives. And right now, I'm not really seeing much of, much attention to those issues by either party. Anyway, we'll have 4 years to talk about that in more detail, but let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how Trump is retaliating against government officials who aren't going along with his disinformation campaign regarding the election.
Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H. in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Stephen in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go. PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Okay. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Just a quick correction on one of our partners that I told you about during the last segment. So if you're looking to get a VPN in order to protect your online activity, PureVPN is the way to go. And the URL to check out is tyt.com/PureVPN, tyt.com/PureVPN. Also, as you guys know, we are fundraising to keep TYT sustainable till the end of the year. That's when our fundraising efforts will be over. So each month we're trying to raise a certain amount of money. Let's take a quick look at where we are with our fund thermometer. All right, so the goal for November is 200,000 and we're up to 71,066. If you have any interest in contributing, any amount helps, even if it's $1, $5. We love being able to only be accountable to you guys. And so having you guys fund this show gives us the opportunity to do all the programming we do, all the specials we do, and we really, really appreciate it. tyt.com/go is where you can contribute.
And I don't think most people know how expensive daily operations in the war on Thanksgiving actually are. Like somebody's got to smash those pumpkins, round up all the stuffing and burn it before it can be eaten. And that takes a lot of money.
I can't wait to talk about that story. We will. But let me just say, minus what the historical context is, right? I love Thanksgiving. I love what Thanksgiving has morphed into, right? Mm-hmm. I love being with family. I love eating a good meal with family. It's just, anyway, we'll talk about conservatives and their lunacy later. But right now, let's talk about Trump's lunacy because that's still happening. So Donald Trump has fired the top cybersecurity official over the fact that this official had the audacity to say that we had an election that was totally safe, that didn't have any problems, no widespread fraud. But of course, that goes against Donald Trump's narrative that he lost as a result of widespread fraud. Fraud that he and his lawyers, Rudy Giuliani in particular, have failed to provide any evidence of. And so what did Trump do? Well, he fired Christopher Krebs and he did so on Twitter. Here's what he wrote. The recent statement by Chris Krebs on the security of the 2020 election was highly inaccurate in that there were massive improprieties and fraud, including dead people voting, not true. Poll watchers not allowed into polling locations, not true. Glitches in the voting machines, which changed votes from Trump to Biden, also not true. Late voting, not true, and many more. Therefore, effective immediately, Chris Krebs has been terminated as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a clunky name for a government agency, I must admit. But nonetheless, this is what Trump does. He retaliates against any government official who doesn't go along with his complete and utter lies. And if there were widespread voter fraud, he and his lawyers, through the dozens of lawsuits they filed in key battleground states, could have proven it at this point. They could have provided evidence, but they have failed to do so. And John, before I get to you, I do want to show this quick video detailing exactly why Donald Trump would want to fire someone like Christopher Krebs.
Christopher Krebs headed the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Just last week, the agency called the 2020 election the most secure in American history, contradicting the president's claims of voter fraud. Krebs told CBS News last night he was expecting to lose his job, adding he has no regrets.
So he was expecting to lose his job because he knew that saying the right things and being honest with the American people would put a target on his back. And as he expected, Donald Trump fired him the way that Donald Trump would fire someone, over Twitter, like a complete and utter child.
And the way he wrote it, therefore, effective immediately. Chris Krebs has been terminated. Like, again, it's like they're using the language to try to make it seem as if this is official, and I am a very strong man who's making strong decisions.
I'm kind of a strong man.
It's Twitter, you little twit. Like, it just makes you come across even more petulant and angry. And the fact that his statements about Chris Krebs doing a fact check on his election misinformation, the fact that those tweets themselves are marked by Twitter as containing election misinformation is just like, mwah, I just love it. But there's a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news. The good news, as I discussed in a live video earlier today, is that Chris Krebs apparently, as part of acknowledging that he was probably going to be fired, set up a new position inside of CISA beneath him and beneath his immediate successor, both of which are sort of political appointments that can easily be terminated. Another person that he chose that is not going to be as easy to fire. So this is not one of the cases where Donald Trump is necessarily going to immediately get the political hack and flunky that he wants in charge of that agency. So that's good information. The bad news, I guess, is that like with the changes to the Department of Defense over the past couple of weeks, seeing Donald Trump, this embattled wannabe strongman on the verge of, in theory, conceding or maybe not, clearing out all of the people who dare to show any disloyalty to him, doesn't mean that he's going to seize power or whatever, but these are the things you would do if that was what your plan was.
Yeah, how do people not see how undemocratic Donald Trump is? How do you, I get feeling frustration when your preferred candidate doesn't win. I totally get that. But I also understand being able to share frustrations over a political loss, while also understanding the importance of protecting our democratic process. And to see all of these right-wingers who claimed that athletes kneeling during the national anthem was so offensive to our troops. What about what you're doing right now? I mean, they argue that our troops fight for our freedoms. They fight to keep us free. But in this case, you have Donald Trump retaliating against people, government officials who are doing their jobs appropriately, doing the right thing, but they had the audacity to speak out or contradict Donald Trump's lies about election meddling or election fraud. And as a result, that's totally fine. Because hey, it's Donald Trump. As long as Donald Trump says it, it's totally fine to dismantle our democratic process. Great. But these people don't get to say whatever they want to say about Colin Kaepernick or whoever, not supporting our troops or not respecting our troops, when everything they're doing right now is enabling the type of undemocratic behavior that our troops are supposed to be fighting against.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do want to also share Krebs, the last tweet in response to this put out by Krebs. He said, "Honored to serve, we did it right, defend today, secure tomorrow, hashtag protect 2020. So I know nothing about his politics, it doesn't matter. He stood up for himself, and that's very rare to find in government these days.
And there was a funny moment too, because as you probably noticed in that tweet, he misspelled tomorrow, and he quote retweeted it. I can't believe I misspelled tomorrow. In his strong final message, typo. They really are like you and me.
I know. All right, well, let's move on to some coronavirus news. There's been a flood of positive news related to coronavirus. Now, Donald Trump has very little to do with it, of course, because of his incompetence and lack of leadership in responding to the pandemic. However, we've heard from 2 different pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer and Moderna, that they have shown promising results for a coronavirus vaccine in their trials. So they are now applying for emergency authorization use with the FDA. And if things continue to go well with testing, vaccines could be widely available later in 2021, likely in the spring. Now, Donald Trump actually isn't happy about that. And it's not that he is concerned about getting the vaccine quickly enough so people say, we can save lives, so healthcare workers aren't worried about risking their lives as they're treating coronavirus patients. He doesn't care about any of that. What Donald Trump is upset about is that he's worried that he's not going to get the proper credit for helping to develop a vaccine. Now, my commentary on this is a little mixed. Let me give you the details. So prior to the announcement of those breakthroughs with Pfizer and Moderna, Donald Trump had brainstormed with aides and close associates about ways he could promote the vaccine to the American people. According to 2 individuals with direct knowledge of his private comments, the president had said he envisioned large, public, mask-free events and rallies to celebrate the success of Operation Warp Speed, the public-private partnership to develop a vaccine. So this was his plan when he assumed he was going to get reelected. And now that he has not been reelected, he's fuming behind the scenes because once the widespread rollout of these vaccines happens in the late spring of 2021, Biden's likely to get credit for it as opposed to Donald Trump. Now, should Donald Trump get some credit for it? A little bit, and I'll explain why. But before I do, John, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, he's such an a-hole, man.
He is, he really is.
Like, yeah, we got a vaccine, everybody gather and we got a vaccine. It's like announcing the cure for cancer inside of a microwave. Free x-rays for everybody. It's just like even on the way out, he has to be an a-hole, and I agree, deserves some small credit. Although he really needs to think this out, because not that he's gone super public saying he should get credit, there's a few tweets and stuff like that. But in like 3 months, he's gonna be tweeting constantly about how nobody should take the vaccine because it's bad and it's like something.
Gosh, you're right.
He's 100%. And Fox News, by the way, is going to be telling everyone not to take the vaccine. It's the government getting into your bloodstream and everything. So not that they have to be consistent, their followers won't remember any of this anyway, but it's sort of rich that he just, for a very brief period of time, wants credit for something he hasn't shown interest in for months and will eventually be demagoguing against.
Yeah, and he was planning on doing like these press conferences where he was going to unveil various headlines, negative headlines about his handling of coronavirus, and then he'd be like, but now there are vaccines, so like he wanted to do this whole like strike back vengeance thing, and he's upset that he's not gonna be able to do that now. But anyway, Trump has been complaining about how he's unlikely to get credit pretty openly. So here's an example of one of his tweets on this. He says, another vaccine just announced, this time by Moderna, 95% effective. For those great historians, please remember that these great discoveries, which will end the China plague, God, he's such a bad person, all took place on my watch. Okay, all right, Donnie, okay. Let's all calm down. Let's talk about the details and whether or not he deserves some credit. So much like other administrations, the federal government does provide research and development money for a lot of these pharmaceutical companies who then create various medications, drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and then they proceed to turn around and gouge the American people. So does the government help fund the research and development of drugs and vaccines? Yes, absolutely. Did that happen in this case? Yes and no. So Pfizer actually did not take any of the federal government funding under Operation Warp Speed. They did take money from the federal government by essentially allowing the federal government to buy a large volume of doses of the vaccine, right? But in that sense, the government is essentially a consumer buying doses of the vaccine for the American people. But Pfizer did not take research and development money from Donald Trump or the Operation Warp Speed initiative. Now, Moderna did. Moderna took quite a bit of money, and I think it's relevant to mention that. So Moderna took about $1.5 billion for 100 million doses of the vaccine. But prior to developing the vaccine, they did take $1 billion in funding for the design and testing of the vaccine. And that money did come from Operation Warp Speed. So there you go, we're fair here, right? I'm gonna dunk on Donald Trump where he deserves it. And he definitely deserves it when he's being like a little baby about not getting the proper credit. But in this case, with Moderna, he did provide the funding, and I think that he deserves credit for that. But any opportunity he has to do something well, any opportunity for positive coverage of his actions, he immediately diminishes it or destroys it by acting like a complete and utter child.
Yep.
250,000 Americans are dead because of how poorly you've handled this pandemic. You should be more concerned about ensuring that you help to save people's lives, but instead he's concerned about like, I'm not gonna get to do my little party.
Yeah, and get more people sick. Yes, so with one more than the other, he deserves some sort of nominal credit. I think that the reason that he's claiming credit for both, when one was provided funding to and the other was not, is that he doesn't know and he doesn't care. He has absolutely no idea because, and this is probably gonna be a mind blower, and I don't know for sure, I'm gonna guess he had absolutely nothing to do with the funding for this. I mean, he's president technically, but I doubt he set the level. I doubt he was coordinating with them. He literally hasn't even gone to a coronavirus task force meeting in months. It happened under his watch, but did it have anything to do with him? No, it's very easy to give away other people's money, honestly. And in sort of the context of his overall approach to coronavirus, I'm not gonna work too hard to give him credit. And by the way, if he wants to get credit for the coronavirus related things that happened under his watch, this is not the only thing having to do with the pandemic that happened under your watch, buddy. Whether you were actually watching or not, a lot of bad stuff happened. As you pointed out, 250,000 people already have died. Maybe 100,000 more will die between now and when you're finally kicked out of the White House. All of that also happened under your watch. And I have a feeling that whether the American people in the end credit him or Joe Biden, or I would argue maybe the scientists the most with getting the vaccine, I think history will remember his effect on the pandemic pretty clearly.
Also, I mean, he knows what's likely to happen because he was ready and willing to take credit for the economy when we know damn well that the economy had already begun to improve under Obama. And then as soon as Trump's elected, he just had the opportunity to ride that wave. And by the way, the huge caveat to that is the economy improved for people invested in the stock markets. But that's not the case when it came to the vast majority of Americans, many of whom don't have the income necessary to invest or save. But he loves to take credit for things that he hasn't accomplished, so he's worried about someone else doing that to him. And I just think it's hilarious. Frida Lucha from our members' comment says, my little brother, who is 13, said that Trump is like a kid tweeting, "You can't sit with us because you're not in the cool club anymore, Chris Krebs." I love it. Chris Krebs, of course, the cybersecurity official who was fired because he went against Trump's ridiculous, deceptive voter fraud narrative. Anyway, you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join, where we read your comments and respond. Anyway, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we already have some pretty bad news coming out of President-elect Joe Biden's upcoming administration. He just chose someone to serve in his administration who does not have a good record when it comes to climate change. We'll give you the details on that and more when we come back.
Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H. in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Steven in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right-wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go. PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them.
Okay. Bring it down.
TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman. And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, the most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016.
Welcome back to TYT. I feel like randomly letting you guys know that we're currently working on plans to go back to a 2-hour show. It's in the works. I'm not gonna give you a firm date yet because things can obviously change. Coronavirus is surging, so we gotta be careful. But I'm really looking forward to filling you guys in on my home projects, because that's what we used to do in the post game. We used to talk about personal stuff.
Wait, you've been doing some?
Oh, yeah, of course. Like news. It's not even about news. Like it's my way of being creative. Like that's I guess my artistic creativity is home stuff. Like
awesome.
Remodeling, redecorating, learning how to do things with my hands. I love it. It's so good. I love power tools. Anyway, power tools are fun, man.
That sounds awesome.
Like, yeah, I mess with the miter saw and a table saw and a circular saw. So much fun.
You
anyway,
own multiple saws?
I do. I love them. So I have no room to store them because I live in a condo, but it doesn't matter. I find ways to I'm like a little squirrel with power tools. I have them like buried like all over the place. Anyway, all right. I wanted to read some comments real quick. So No More Trigonometry says, maybe Democrats would win more seats if they stopped running as Republican light and undermining progressives. Totally agree. And No More Trigonometry, I recommend you read the full article on that meeting with Schumer, because they did, some of the senators, Democratic senators did bring that up. They had a problem with the fact that Schumer backed Amy McGrath, for instance, who was certainly Republican light. And they could have gone in a different direction.
They've now been blacklisted from the party.
Well, probably. Lieutenant McGee says, of course, socialism and defund the police were used as GOP battle cry. Even fellow Democrats are criticizing them, which validates it. Totally agree. What Dems should be doing is supporting and attacking the GOP instead of just playing defense. I think that's the best point. I just wish that they were a little more united. There was a little more solidarity. I mean, you certainly see that on the right. And I wish they came up with an offensive battle plan rather than constantly playing defense. Gabby Marita says Russian election interference isn't half as sinister as the election interference being attempted by Republicans. You guys are the best. All right, you know what? I'm gonna read one super chat. Thomas Johnson says, it is critical that progressives push Joe Biden to live up to his promise regarding a public option in healthcare. In addition to getting more people healthcare, the public option would expose inefficiencies of the private system, leading to single payer down the line. Thomas, I could not agree with you more on that statement. However, this next story that I'm about to share with you is foreshadowing. But who knows, maybe if progressives fight hard enough, we can get some things accomplished, we'll see. So, I don't know why it's not coming out. Louisiana Congressman Cedric Richmond, who has taken vast contributions from the fossil fuel industry, will serve in President-elect Joe Biden's administration. So this is a problem, especially considering what Richmond has been chosen for. Richmond, a national co-chair to Biden's presidential campaign, will leave his House seat to serve as a senior advisor with the title of Director of the Office of Public Engagement. Richmond is also expected to serve as a liaison with the business community and climate change activists. So as someone who's taken a considerable amount of money from the fossil fuel industry, it's strange to put him in a position where he would be, dealing with any type of climate activism. But
in good faith, anyway.
In good faith, exactly. And I think it is important to look at his record, and I want to give you some details on how much money he has taken from the fossil fuel industry. So during his 10 years in Congress, Richmond has received roughly $341,000 from donors in the oil and gas industry, the 5th highest total among House Democrats. That includes corporate political action committee donations of $50,000 from Entergy, my bad. Okay, from Entergy, an electric and natural gas utility, $40,000 from ExxonMobil, and $10,000 apiece from oil companies Chevron, Phillips 66, and Valero Energy. It gets worse. Richmond was ranked in that money. Richmond has raked in that money while representing a congressional district that is home to 7 of the 10 most air polluted census tracts in the country. And also during the climate crisis that has battered his home state of Louisiana, Richmond has joined with Republicans to vote to increase fossil fuel exports and promote pipeline development. He also voted against Democratic legislation to place pollution limits on fracking, and he voted for GOP legislation to limit the Obama administration's authority to move to more stringently regulate the practice. So he not only takes money from fossil fuel companies, he also acts on that influence by those campaign donations. Yeah. So John, as someone who cares deeply about climate change and covers it extensively on your show, I love to hear your thoughts.
They're not good.
Bad.
Yeah, no, it's yay, great. And it would be one thing if it was, like, you could, in theory, he could have chosen this guy for a number of different positions that have very little to do with climate change. I mean, I would argue that the range of jobs that have to do with climate change are pretty broad, but you could have found something a little bit more removed from directly serving as the liaison to these sorts of groups. But they haven't. Either either because of a conscious decision that they don't care about this, a lack of commitment to proper, not vetting necessarily because it's public information, but actually caring enough to prioritize choosing someone without these sorts of ties, or theoretically as a trial balloon just to let people know, what direction they're going in terms of their staffing. And when I saw this sort of thing, obviously initially you had that pang of like, oh, come on, seriously? And I think that that's sort of a residual thing where leading into Biden choosing his cabinet, if you'd asked me, is Biden gonna keep all of his promises? I would have said no, but you can still have that latent hope that, hey, maybe he'll do the right thing in a way no politician does, which doesn't turn out to be true. And what I then retreat to is the position of, how did we present Joe Biden when we were supporting him for the months leading up to the election? Very consciously as our preferred opponent out of the two. And this is the sort of thing an opponent does. And then you have to respond accordingly. And thankfully, people who care about climate change are responding to this, putting pressure on them to not actually keep him on that position. We'll have to see how successful that is. This is a very low-level, minor fight over climate change. There are far more important ones. We need to win this to really have any hope of winning the bigger ones.
Right, yeah, I think you make a great point there. And I think that this is just the latest example, because I think there have been many that demonstrate how Biden is going to just really follow through on this moderate centrist messaging that we got from him during the election. He didn't hide it. I mean, Biden was really the only candidate who, from the jump, just said that, no, I think we need to work with Republicans. I think that, leading from the middle is the way to go. As I've mentioned a billion times on the show, he told his Wall Street donors that nothing will fundamentally change under his leadership. The only difference between Biden and Trump is that the bleeding needs to stop, and Biden will stop the bleeding. And what do I mean by that? Things devolved so quickly under the Trump administration. And I'm talking about just basic rights, basic protections. And our democratic process has been in jeopardy under the Trump administration. But when it comes to policy proposals that I desperately want as someone on the left, I'm not gonna be naive and think that Biden's going to deliver. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least try, that we shouldn't fight and hold him accountable as much as we can. Now, Congressman Cedric Richmond as a pick for Biden's administration is such a bad look that Kamala Harris literally ran away after being asked about it. Let's take a look.
How involved in cabinet positions and appointments have you been with President-elect Biden? Very. And how do you feel about Representative Cedric Richmond?
Thank you. See you later. I've been very involved. So what do you think about Richmond? See you later. Bye, gotta go. Can't answer that question. So obviously, as someone who has taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from the fossil fuel industry, having Cedric Richmond in Biden's administration is a problem, especially if Biden, on one hand, claims that he cares deeply about climate change, and then on the other hand, says that he wants to protect fracking, and then pick someone like Cedric Richmond to serve in his administration. So
yeah, totally. And seeing her respond that way and so quickly, like the question was not out, like it wasn't even finished at that point. I would naively want to interpret that as this is her very plausible, deniable way of registering her frustration with that pick, maybe, in theory. I mean, after all, she has presented herself during the primary as someone more critical of fracking than Joe Biden. But it could also be that she is just fully aware of the conflict going on publicly around this right now and doesn't want to weigh in, but is perfectly comfortable with him serving the administration. We're gonna need more than just a quick nope to know for sure.
Right, yeah, and I mean-
And one last other final thing, she's very involved in the process, and they are going with that guy.
That's right, that's right. And progressives are already fighting the potential Biden pick of Heidi Heitkamp in his administration. She's being considered as head of the USDA, and she was certainly a moderate, if you want to label her nicely, but she does not in any way represent what progressives want in the federal government. And it's an issue, especially considering some of her conflicts of interest that would impact some of her decision making as head of the USDA. So far we're getting some pretty bad signs from Biden's picks, but we'll keep you guys posted and updated on it as we learn more. All right, one more story for you before we end the first hour. In the battle between Trump loyalists and the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, Trump just got destroyed. He got destroyed because the Secretary of State, of course, he's the Secretary of State of Georgia, has come out and basically delivered some cold, hard facts about how Trump's disinformation campaign led to Republicans staying home and not voting in Georgia. So in a recent interview, Raffensperger said there were 24,000 Republicans in Georgia who actually did vote during the June primaries, but then didn't show up to vote on election day. Here's what he said. They did not vote absentee because they were told by the president, don't go to absentee, it's not secure. But then they did not come out and vote in person. He would have won by 10,000 votes. He actually suppressed his own voting base. But it's so true. I mean, it's, John, take it away.
Do you want people to vote or don't you? Well, I mean, we already know that answer. But you get that like some people support you. Like when you, and this is not a new thing, whenever Republicans do the thing where they try to stop college students from voting if they originally lived out of state, they do that because they know that on balance, it takes away the rights of more Democrats than Republicans. But every single time they do that, they do still disenfranchise some Republicans. They're just comfortable with that because they don't care about those people. But like overall in a close election, maybe do the thing that results in more of your people coming out, especially if you're as confident about how committed and passionate your voters are. You've been saying that month after month. Well, then actually rely on that and have people vote and assume that you can win based on that.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible, right? Because I remember prior to the election happening, there were a few Republican lawmakers who spoke out. I mean, they didn't speak out publicly, but they did speak to reporters to say, look, we're concerned that this is going to, he's unwittingly suppressing Republican voters by spreading this disinformation about mail-in ballots. And that didn't get as much attention as I thought it would. And I was curious to see if their predictions would come true, and it did. So at least in some cases, like in Georgia, where the election was somewhat close, Trump could have won, but his misinformation ended up coming back to bite him in the butt. And Raffensperger and his wife, unfortunately, are receiving all sorts of pretty terrible death threats as a result of Donald Trump attacking him. Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are demanding that he step down, even though he did his job appropriately. There was no widespread voter fraud. One message sent to him and his wife read this: your husband deserves to face a firing squad. Wow. You better not botch this recount, another message read. Your life depends on it, a third message sent to the Republican official's wife said. The Raffenspergers should be put on trial for treason and face execution. So that's what they're unfortunately dealing with. But I do give him a great deal of credit. I don't agree with him on policies. We're not in the same political party, but I do give him quite a bit of credit for sticking to his guns and understanding the importance of maintaining our democratic process. It's hard to come by in government these days, especially among Republicans. Post game is next, free for everyone. We'll see you there.
Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Stephen in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go.
PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman. And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it
doing
was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016.
Oh yeah, it's members. It's open, but I'm gonna read some member comments right now because they're awesome and I didn't get to them during the main show. So when we go back to a 2-hour show, does this mean the post game will become Anna's woodworking hour? I'd pay to watch that. That's what Effectos wrote in, and the answer is yes. So if you are not a member yet and you want some scintillating woodworking videos, definitely become a member. tyt.com/join. Who wouldn't?
You know, related to that, one thing I almost live streamed. I got a new bike recently that was shipped to me and I had to assemble it. And I thought that might be a fun thing to live stream, me putting this together. And I didn't, and I'm very glad that I didn't, because it took a long time and I dropped everything a million times and I did a mediocre job. But you should with your woodworking.
I love anything that requires you to like build something. I think it's pretty cool. And one of the hottest things my husband ever said was like one of his jobs in between like baseball seasons was to like assemble motorcycles. And I don't know, I'm not even a motorcycle fan, but I thought that was so sexy. Like,
You should just you could have an old bike as art inside of your house. You can assemble it.
Oh, he can assemble it, that's right. All right, let's move on. I have other news to get to, including Thanksgiving. Why do leftists hate it, according to Charlie Kirk? So, Charlie Kirk, much like other conservatives, loves to scaremonger about how the left allegedly wants to destroy the holidays. And the latest example is Thanksgiving. And so what's his evidence for why the left allegedly hates Thanksgiving? Let's watch.
The left has always hated Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving can be interpreted as a religious holiday if you believe in giving thanks to a creator. But they hate Thanksgiving because they believe there is nothing you should be thankful for in America. This is an awful place. It is cancerous, rotten to the core. Tear it all down, burn it from within. Why would you be thankful? Instead, we need a revolution. Remember, as the Students for a Democratic Society radicals once wrote in the 1960s, they said, conflict is the origin of everything. What happens when you're thankful? By definition, you're less likely to be involved and engaged in conflict. Thanksgiving is supposed to de-escalate any sort of pre-existing issues in our country. And now they're using the virus as an excuse for you not to be thankful.
He is so bad on camera, my God, he's terrible at this. It's not a difficult job, he's so bad.
My favorite thing about that video is how he's not saying anything substantive at all. Like he's just screaming like about nonsense with no evidence, making all sorts of crazy accusations. But he's doing it while like holding a pen, like, you know, holding a pen, and he takes these long pauses to look at his computer, like to, hold on. Let me reevaluate my notes for a second, okay? Very serious pause.
It has to be talking
here.
points.
And then he looks back at the camera and says more lunatic stuff that makes no sense. Like you had to look at your notes, you had to look at your computer to remember your lunatic talking points.
Yeah. That you're making up. Yeah, my favorite thing is that I'm glad you reminded me of the pen. In one of the videos I saw him, I've seen like 3 videos from that show, which I still can't believe exists. Every time I see it, I think, my God, how is this a thing? He once, because you know, like you're supposed to get fired up on camera, he once took his pen and he did this. Because he was so mad, and it just made me really sad for him, and his whole demeanor and look makes me really sad. I described it this morning as like he woke up on the beach 5 minutes late to do his show. That's the vibe I'm getting off of him. Oh my God, I don't know how that's a thing. This is what you get when billionaires decide who your media figures are and not organic.
No, all kidding aside, just look at him for a second.
He looks like hell.
No, like someone needs to do a wellness check. And I'm not kidding. I know it sounds like I am. I'm being 100% serious. His hair is constantly a mess. He has like ramblings of a madman on the whiteboard behind him. Like what is he writing? What is he talking about? He's accusing people of, the left hates Thanksgiving because they don't believe there's anything to be thankful for. Okay, cool. Can you like quote one of these leftists that, you know, said something along those lines? Can you provide any, like
Aren't we thankful for cancel culture or something?
It's so
Don't we love communism? Like we're thankful for something, right? Even in your twisted worldview, we're thankful for kale, almond milk. Like we're thankful for something.
Before I saw that video, I thought his argument was gonna be, oh, the left, they don't like Thanksgiving because of all of the murder and all of the massacres of Native Americans. How dare they? I thought he was gonna go in that direction, where I would be like, okay, he's got a good point. The left does critique the whole notion, like how Thanksgiving came about. And I think that that's a valid critique for sure. But if you take history out of it and you just focus on what Thanksgiving has become, right, on a very surface level, superficial level, who doesn't love getting together with their families to share a delicious meal, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're vegan, whether you're not a vegan, whether you like mac and cheese. By the way, if you don't like mac and cheese, you're not invited to my Thanksgiving. Who are you? Why would you even be there? But no, I mean, obviously I'm kidding.
Oh my God, I'm so hungry right now.
God, that looks so good right now.
Who put this up? This is making me so hungry.
having a
it's
very
so stupid.
Pavlovian
The whole
response.
thing, he's not one of the better right-wing grifters on video. It turns out like this is not a difficult thing. Doing right-wing grift on video is not that difficult, but there is a threshold, I guess, and not everybody reaches it. And so he's doing a thing where they need to come up with some sort of social issue to be furious about. And if you can tie it to religion, even better, because so many of your followers are religious. He tied this to religion in the most ham-fisted way possible to keep it on brand with Thanksgiving, where he says, it can be interpreted as a religious holiday if you think of giving thanks to your creator. Like, okay, and I guess Christmas is technically still religious if you think about that God gave us the present of life. Like, no, it's not a religious thing, it's just not. And so the actual debate that we're having is, should people have big family gatherings?
Right.
And he doesn't want to acknowledge that that's what the debate about is, because then he has to counter the very real critique of, you might die or kill your family members. So let's put that to the side because that's just scary. No, it's that they don't like being thankful for things and they hate cranberry sauce. It's clownish.
Quarter of 1 million Americans have died from coronavirus during this pandemic so far. We are experiencing a severe spike in new coronavirus cases. We have 11.4 million confirmed cases as of today, right, throughout the pandemic. And so, giving Americans advice on how to protect themselves and their loved ones during the holidays is common sense. It shouldn't be offensive, it shouldn't be a big deal. And quite honestly, if you're one of the people who's like, this is too much government meddling in my personal life, stop being a baby. Like, seriously, stop being a child. I'm getting together with my family on Thanksgiving, okay? It's a small gathering. We're all super responsible. We're constantly wearing our masks. We don't go out and we don't dine indoors at restaurants. We just avoid any and all risky behavior. We're gonna all get tested before we get together for Thanksgiving. It's literally just my immediate family. And we're gonna enjoy our Thanksgiving like we do every year. Like responsible, rational adults. For the right wingers who can't manage their own lives and get a little bit of advice on how to keep themselves safe from medical experts, if you're losing your mind over that, how do you function day to day? How do you function day to day? You have agency over your own life. So get it together and stop crying. And more importantly, stop buying into the scaremongering from lunatics like Charlie Kirk, who quite honestly, and I'm being serious here, needs someone to check in on him. He is not well.
It's been a rough year, man. I like that at least out of all the right wingers, he's being visibly and physically affected the way we are.
Speak for yourself, John. I don't feel like I'm being physically affected. Who are you?
She's improved this year.
No, I haven't improved, but I think I'm hanging in there, okay? All right, well, let's move on to our next story. So Fox and Friends usually goes along with everything Donald Trump wants. Every once in a while, maybe a little bit of critique, maybe contradicting some of Trump's lies. And that certainly happened recently when Brian Kilmeade, of all people, made a point that I'm sure Donald Trump is not gonna be too happy about. Let's watch.
Here's the thing. I think for the President of the United States, while he continues to fight on, and this is probably going to be the end of the week for Pennsylvania if they don't produce something, I think it's going to, in the country's best interest, if he starts coordinating on the virus and starts coordinating with security with the Biden team and just brief them. Because on the virus, we're going to be able to get this out as soon as 2 weeks. We need to coordinate on the transportation and implementation, and he'll see how thorough the planning has been, so we don't drop the ball in a little while.
So Trump still refuses to concede the general election to Joe Biden, and as a result, the transition process has been hindered. And Biden is not receiving the intelligence briefings he needs to receive. He's not able to move forward with the planning and coordination necessary to effectively battle the coronavirus pandemic. And it's kind of shocking to hear Brian Kilmeade, again, one of these Trump loyalists on Fox News, just speak clearly about how important it is for Trump to allow this transition process to move forward. So I don't think Trump is gonna listen to that because he's using his disinformation campaign about unfounded, widespread voter fraud in order to raise money from his base. And they're falling for it, hook, line, and sinker, and it's beyond frustrating because it could lead to a dangerous situation down the line where people get violent because they genuinely think Trump is telling the truth about the election. He's not.
Yeah, the longer this goes, they've invested so much of their hopes in the fact that it's going to be overturned, but it's not going to be. And so that is going to be a big crashing point for a lot of people. I wonder if Brian Kilmeade is going to not apologize for this because that would draw too much attention to it, but say something tomorrow to try to reverse it, because it's really like a double sin. The first sin is what you were talking about, the fact that he's acknowledging that Trump is probably going to not be the president. That is like the worst thing you can do. But the secondary one is the way he's talking about the pandemic, they're also not supposed to either. He's saying we need to have this transition so they can coordinate because that's important, but that's not supposed to be important. It's not supposed to be urgent because the pandemic's not a bad thing. It's not something that you need to worry about. That's the weird tightrope act that Trump wanting credit for the vaccine has to walk too. It's that you want credit for something that you're saying is really important, but it addresses something that's mostly a hoax and isn't really killing people, and the doctors are just making it up to make more money and all of that. It's this weird thing where like, if we need to make sure that this vaccine comes out soon, why? Because it's killing a lot of people, but we're not supposed to say that it's killing a lot of people. Brian Kilmeade, he's kind of like a goofball in some ways. He doesn't always think about what he's saying.
Right.
I'm curious to see once he's had a little bit of time and distance from this, how he'll talk about it in the future. I mean, credit, I guess, for saying the right thing. We'll see if he sticks to it though.
Sure, I mean, but remember, we've now experienced 8 months of this pandemic. I mean, 8 months of actually knowing the severity of the pandemic, and Trump's biggest enablers are on that panel of Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
So sure, credit, a little tiny bit of credit for finally speaking up and encouraging Trump to do the right thing. I do think it'll fall on deaf ears, and I do wish that Fox didn't enable Trump to the extent that they did, because you can't win with Trump. There's no way to be loyal enough to Trump. Eventually, he'll back you into a corner with something so outrageous that if you stand up for yourself or you have the audacity to say the right thing to protect people's lives, he will come for you. That's the kind of person Trump is.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have some more dunking on our agenda today, so let's do it. Ever since Donald Trump lost the general election, the number of conservatives who have joined Parler has increased quite a bit, and it gives us an opportunity to dunk on these conservatives because they are being giant babies. Now, Parler is supposed to be the answer to Twitter. As we know, right-wingers have been claiming that Twitter is censoring them. They hate the fact that Twitter is now finally fact-checking Donald Trump and all the disinformation he puts out there regarding the election. And so they're like, we want to go to a place where we can really exercise our free speech. So Parler became their safe space. Now, Parler shot up to #1 on Apple's App Store the day after major media outlets projected Joe Biden would win the 2020 presidential election. Parler has been downloaded nearly 1 million times within 5 days of election day, November 3rd. Now, the original push to join Parler actually began in June when social media sites started labeling Trump tweets as misleading. And so here's a quick example of various right-wingers who were like, join Parler, it's so great. There's Rand Paul, it's about time you all join the Parler app. What's taking the rest of you so long, blah, blah, blah. You have Devin Nunes, is this MySpace? Dan Bongino, join Parler, you guys get the picture. And Parler does describe itself as non-biased, free speech social media focused on protecting users' rights. And that's why Ted Cruz joined it. Watch.
Big tech has shown the ability to shadow ban or to silence whatever you say. That's why I'm proud to join Parler. This platform gets what free speech is all about, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's speak freely, and let's end the Silicon Valley censorship.
Except there's a catch. As expected, Parler does censor opinions they don't like. So one Parler user, James Wellmeyer, told NBC News, pretty much all of my leftist friends joined Parler to screw with MAGA folks, and every last one of them was banned in less than 24 hours because conservatives truly love free speech. Writer and comedian Tony Poznansky also received a ban from the app saying, "Free speech my ass. I literally said less than here and I got banned," he tweeted. And by the way, I should note that Parler has some pretty sketchy privacy issues. For instance, for people who choose to join the app's influencer network, the company may ask for information such as your social security number or your tax identification number.
That is insane.
That is insane.
I've literally never had a website, I don't think, that wasn't affiliated with the government that wanted either of those things. That's not gonna end up in some sort of massive con in some way. Yeah, no, it's just nonsense. One of the issues with America is that we create language that seems as if in theory it could be applied to both people, but it's only ever applied to people in the left or maybe the center. When people are acknowledging that Joe Biden won the election, the right wingers get pissed off because it's not politically correct. They don't use that term when right wingers get mad, but that's definitely what it is. Parler is a safe space, that's all it is. It's not about censorship on other platforms, it's wanting to be insulated from opinions you don't like. Twitter censoring, no, they say shadow banning. They've literally never proven that that actually happens. And if you want the best demonstration of how committed Twitter is to never censoring things, even when there's a very good case to be made that it should be, Donald Trump has tweeted today 30 things designed to help overthrow democracy, and they put a little label at the bottom. They haven't even got rid of it. He's totally fine, he can keep doing it. He'll do it now, and between now and inauguration 500 more times, they'll never censor him. It's just that grift requires victimhood. And so they will always pretend that they are censored no matter how much extra boost and reach they're given by people like Mark Zuckerberg and all of that. It is pathetic. It's pathetic, but they're making money off of it.
Well, just one more piece of evidence to buttress your point or reinforce your point, John. Who's funding Parler? Well, Parler is being funded by wealthy hedge fund investor Robert Mercer and his daughter, Rebecca Mercer. So it is a safe space for right wingers to argue that this is truly a social media platform where all ideas are welcomed and no one gets censored is absolutely ridiculous. And there is a difference between censorship and correcting a disinformation campaign.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to our election and protecting our democracy, labeling something as misleading makes a lot of sense. That's not the same as censoring someone. Anyway, let's move on to something that I've actually been wanting to talk about. Because I think some of the language that's used to refer to right-wing gang members, for instance, referring to them as militias, is a problem because it makes them sound like they're good guys or that they're cool or something, when in reality, don't get it twisted, these are gang members. So, the Proud Boys have an initiation process, similar to what you would expect from some of the worst gangs in America. The same gangs that Donald Trump fearmongered about when he was running for president back in 2015. The same types of gangs that led to broken windows policies and policing. The kind of stuff that usually gets pinned on black and brown people in the United States. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's take a look at one initiation process featuring Proud Boys, and they were dumb enough to put this on tape. Let's take a look.
Clear on the Proud Boy. I am a Proud Boy. All right. I am a Western chauvinist. I am a Western chauvinist. And I refuse to apologize. For creating the modern world. Gentlemen. 3, 2, 1. Great thoughts. 1. Cheerios. 2. Frosted Flakes. 3. Cocoa Puffs. 4. I like it. To the ground, you're allowed to elbow.
So look, just because they look pathetic doesn't mean that they aren't implementing the same thing that you would see in gangs, right? Mm-hmm. That's what gangs do. They initiate new members by jumping them, by beating them up.
Yeah.
Now, the Proud Boys probably shouldn't be so proud of those punches.
Yeah.
But good for the guy who's getting initiated, right? I mean, that couldn't have hurt him.
Yeah, no, he looks like he looks like a guy who deserves to be punched a lot. Let's not skip too casually over the fact that they do look pathetic. Let's acknowledge that. It looks really embarrassing.
Come on, guys.
It's just, I don't think that they're proud.
Do better. This doesn't make you, it doesn't make you desirable to women at all. at all.
Clearly, where are the women?
It's embarrassing. But that's the thing, like these are the guys who go around calling other men betas. These are the guys who pretend like they're the most masculine. I'm a Western chauvinist and I will not apologize for it. Well, good for you. But like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like the Proud Boys really have a lot to be proud about. Like it seems like they have a lot of insecurities.
Yeah.
It seems like they feel really bad about themselves. I mean, that's why people join gangs. People join gangs to have a sense of community. It's usually individuals who have like problems with friends or their own social circles or their own families. It's actually really sad.
Yeah.
And they're like proudly flaunting that for the world to see. And sometimes it gets super dangerous where they show up to protests and demonstrations heavily armed. And then other times, yeah, they look pathetic and we can laugh at them. But at the end of the day, we're talking about deeply insecure men who are being manipulated by like pretend strongmen like Donald Trump, for instance, or Gavin McInnes. Like it's just, do better. You have potential. I believe in you. Like get out of this mindset. Seriously.
Yeah, no, it's sad, and I don't doubt that every single one of those has very real problems, whether it's family problems or education system failed them, or they accrued a social circle that didn't do them any favors. And all of that, we as soft-hearted lefties can have a lot of sympathy for and empathy for. But once you do the initiation, I'm done with you. Once you do that ridiculous chant about male chauvinist or whatever it was, I don't even know. I don't care about you as an individual anymore. And I'm mostly just gonna laugh at you. I feel a little bit bad sometimes about kink shaming. Clearly, these are people who get off on being made fun of and having people laugh at them. They put the video up. Yeah. Doing the thing is one thing.
Maybe they genuinely think they looked good.
No, not a single one of those person watched this video and thought, I'm basically The Rock.
I like the guy.
I look so cool.
I like the guy on his phone in the background with his like fountain drink. He's like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm part of this, but fountain drink and phone and cigarette.
I want some Diet Coke. I don't know, like it's laughable. And it's not to say that something can be laughable and pathetic and dangerous in theory. Clowns can be scary and you laugh at them too, but no, just like if you are considering at some point, if you're on that path to radicalization, which if you're watching this video, you're probably not, and you're considering joining a group like that, like everybody wants to be part of something, maybe you can join Dragon Squad, but that is the bottom of the totem pole. That is the bottom of the barrel. That's just the most embarrassing thing that you can choose as your identity. And I think it's sort of on its face that.
Since you mentioned Dragon Squad, it's not in here.
Dragon Squad is everywhere, Hannah.
No, you got called something today. Like daddy not drag.
Oh no!
What were you called?
It was beef dragon.
Beef dragon.
No, the whole point was to not have Anna end up saying that.
What does that mean, John? What is beef dragon? Are you beef dragon now?
What do you think it means? See, I'm uncomfortable too now. Anyway,
this is offensive to our vegetarian audience.
It probably is. I should be Seitan dragon, tofu dragon. I don't know.
Let's just stick to daddy dragon. I mean, that made me uncomfortable initially, but I've accepted it. So let's stick to that and let's not get even more uncomfortable with beef dragon.
Yeah, no, and I love that you brought this up in a conversation about the Proud Boys, which was the impetus for the creation of Dragon Squad. I don't know what our initiation ritual is. I guarantee it's gonna be cooler. It can involve breakfast cereals, but I don't think we're gonna punch each other.
All right, we're gonna do one more story because I love you guys and I love giving you the news. And this is something I've been wanting to talk about pretty much all week. So, if you think your job is difficult, I get it. A lot of us have difficult jobs, but imagine being a healthcare worker who has to go into work day in, day out and treat coronavirus patients, many of whom have bought into Donald Trump's disinformation about the pandemic. People who think it's a hoax, people who don't take it seriously until they're breathing their final breath. That was a story that was shared by one healthcare worker, Jody Doring is her name, and she did so through a Twitter thread that I want to share with you. She writes, I have a night off from the hospital. As I'm on my couch with my dog, I can't help but think of the COVID patients the last few days. The ones that stick out are those who still don't believe the virus is real, the ones who scream at you for a magic medicine and that Joe Biden is going to ruin the USA, all while gasping for breath on 100% Vapotherm. They tell you there must be another reason they are sick. They call you names and ask you or ask why you have to wear all that stuff because they don't have COVID because it's not real. Yes, this really happens, and I can't stop thinking about it. These people really think this isn't going to happen to them, and then they stop yelling at you when they get intubated. It's like a effing horror movie that never ends. There's no credits that roll. You just go back and do it all over again. So I'm gonna admit, like in covering all these stories, of course, time to time you think about the doctors and nurses who are there on the front lines every single day, dealing with death all around them, dealing with patients who don't take the virus seriously, refuse to accept the reality of the situation they're experiencing. And it's just it's so hard to go through that every day and then hear Republicans and Donald Trump constantly minimize the severity of this virus. You know, I can't imagine how hard that is. And I give her a lot of credit for speaking out. And these are heroes. These are people who continue doing the work that they're doing despite how difficult it is at this very moment to do it every single day.
Yeah, this is definitely a story that's a reminder of what they've had to deal with, not just in terms of the threat to their life, and many died, especially in the early months. Many nurses and doctors did die, but also just emotionally what they have gone through. And there's been high-profile, stories about suicides of healthcare professionals during this. But this is also a story about the people who are having this experience that the nurse has to see. Like it's one thing to say I don't need to wear a mask or whatever because you believe that you don't actually get it or something like that, or that it's super rare, or that you're too young and you're not going to be affected by it. But I guess I sort of assumed that at some point that brainwashing gets washed away by reality. When you get infected maybe, or when you get hospitalized maybe. But these people are holding on to this as sort of their last thoughts, their last statements, as people, that are about to go on to machine breathing and things like that. That is a level of brainwashing that I did not expect. And it's possible that some of these people might have, ended up that way no matter what. But we've talked a lot about the culpability of people like Donald Trump, these Republican governors, and Fox News. And these sorts of stories are a testament to that generally people want to protect their own life. It takes very powerful manipulation and misinformation to put them in a position where they'll go to their death still insisting that the lie they're holding to is more real than the truth. And it's common enough that this nurse has had multiple experiences like that.
It's so heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking thinking about, even if they've bought into Trump's lies, even if we disagree with them politically, I don't want anyone to ever experience dying alone in a hospital, not being able to have their loved ones around them. I can't imagine that. That is a type of pain that it hurts my heart just thinking about it. I don't want anyone going through it. And these people who bought into Trump's lies, end up getting sick, and unfortunately don't make it, are found, they find themselves in a hospital room, dying alone, without their family there by their side. Yep. And it's, how do the Republicans who have enabled him live with themselves? How do they do it? How do they think about all those people who have died and not feel any guilt, any remorse?
I don't know.
There's just something fundamentally wrong. I'm not one of these people who's obsessed with morality. We have to be moral, right? I think those moral evaluations are usually, done by Republicans actually, in regard to how people live their personal lives when they're not harming anyone else. But in this case, this is as immoral as you can get. You're literally playing with people's lives in the cruelest possible way. And for all the people who think no, how could Trump have lost the election? 250,000 Americans are dead from coronavirus because of Trump. Those people have family members. When you lose loved ones as a result of the incompetence of the federal government under Donald Trump's leadership, you get a little fired up in showing up to vote to get that guy out, even if his political opponent isn't that great. Just keeping it real.
Yeah. And I get so furious when I see people saying that, whether it's people in politics saying we need to work with these people who have done everything they can to raise the death toll throughout this. Mitch McConnell, who hasn't given a damn, and his lack of action has resulted in people having to go back to work and getting sick and dying and all that. But then also that we need to talk with and respect these people in media that we disagree. Like Tucker Carlson has spent more than half a year misinforming people to their death. 2 months into the pandemic, he was telling people that you don't need to abide by any of this. And a couple 100,000 additional deaths has not changed his mind at all. He did a monologue like 2 nights ago about how lockdowns and masks don't help and you don't need to abide by them. There's no science that any of that helps, so don't abide by it. 250,000 Americans, and they are more certain of themselves than they were at the beginning. And why not? Tucker Carlson's audience is bigger than it was, minus the fans of his that are dead because of his advice. Still bigger though, and he's making tons of money and will probably make even more money next year.
Yeah, I mean, John and I talk about this all the time, but the incentives in this country are screwed up, to say the least. The incentives always point you in the wrong direction. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. Old School is next. Thank you to John. Make sure you check out the damage report if you haven't been doing so already. That's where you'll get all the information about where Beef Dragon comes from, but you'll also get important news and
where it's
analysis
going
as well. All right, thank you, John. Thank you to everyone. Old School is next. We'll see you soon.
What do? I get dirty every single year.
You are a beta male.